Now we're moving on to the story about Alec Baldwin, okay? We're going to get into it because I'm just going to go ahead and tell you it is not looking too good for Alec Baldwin. So for those who are not aware, Alec Baldwin, he's an actor, and there was a shooting on the set. Let me get into the article, because the question a lot of people have is, how can he be charged if it was an accident, right? So you have these prop guns on the set. Obviously, there's supposed to be blanks in those guns. There's not supposed to be real bullets. Unfortunately, in this particular situation, there were real bullets. Let's get into it. And then I'm going to show you what the DA is saying. Really quick, though, go ahead and smash that like button for me, guys. That helps me out with the algo. Thank you so much. Alec Baldwin to be charged with manslaughter in fatal 2021 set shooting. So remember, this happened in 2021. Some of you may have actually forgotten about this because it's been a while. So here we go. Actor Alec Baldwin and a weapons specialist will be charged with involuntary manslaughter in the fatal shooting of cinematographer on a New Mexico movie set. Prosecutors announced this on Thursday. That was yesterday, citing a criminal disregard for safety. Santa Fe District Attorney Mary Carmack Altwise issued a statement announcing the charges against Baldwin and Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, who supervised weapons on the set of the Western Russ. Man, Halna Hutchins died shortly after being wounded during rehearsals at a ranch on the outskirts of Santa Fe on October 21st, 2021. Baldwin was pointing a pistol at Hutchins when the gun went off, killing her and wounding the director, Joe Souza. So the director was also hit, but the director survived. Now, I want to remind you of another incident that happened in Hollywood many years ago, and that was with Brandon Lee. So Brandon Lee, he's Bruce Lee's son. He had gotten to the acting business. Some of you remember the movie The Crow. That movie kind of, I guess you would say that movie really made his acting career take off. Like looking back on it, The Crow. So on a set, I have to remember if it was The Crow 2. I think it was the second one that they were making. On the set of the movie, Brandon Lee was shot with actual bullets. So instead of, in the prop gun, instead of having blanks in that gun, it turned out there was actual bullets. Brandon Lee was shot and he died. Some people called that the curse of Bruce Lee. I remember this during that time. Yeah, fuzzy slippers. I agree. That was sus too. I agree. But some people said that was the curse of Bruce Lee, that the family was cursed. I remember that. Now, fast forward to 2021, you would have thought from that incident that happened with Brandon Lee that this would not happen again. Not so much the case, because it did. Assistant Director David Halls, who handed Baldwin the gun, has signed an agreement to plead guilty to negligent use of a deadly weapon. Now, that's coming from the DA's office. The decision to charge Baldwin marked a stunning fall for an A-list actor whose 40-year career included the early blockbuster The Hunt for Red October and a starring role in the sitcom 30 Rock. Yada, yada. Involuntary manslaughter can involve a killing that happens while a defendant is doing something that is lawful but dangerous and is acting negligently or without caution. So I hope that answers the question for people who have been asking, because I've seen people ask this on Twitter, how can they be charged with manslaughter if it was an accident? The DA is going to get into that. When I play that clip, the DA is going to explain to you why they have every right to be charged. It's this piece right here. Acting negligently or without caution. That's the piece that got Alec Baldwin. And we'll get into that in a second. The charge is a fourth-degree felony, punishable by up to 18 months in jail and a $5,000 fine under New Mexico law. The charges also include a provision that could result in a mandatory 5 years in prison because the offense was committed with a gun. Carmack said charges will be filed by the end of January and that Baldwin and Gutierrez Reed will be issued a summons to appear in court. She said prosecutors will forego a grand jury and rely on a judge to determine if there is probable cause to move towards trial. Andrea Reeb, a special prosecutor on the case, cited a pattern of criminal disregard for safety on the set. So this is another thing that you need to pay attention to. If any one of these three people, Alec Baldwin, Hannah Gutierrez Reed, or David Halls, had done their job, Helena, how do you pronounce her name? Helena? Let me start this again. If any one of these three people, Alec Baldwin, Hannah Gutierrez Reed, or David Halls, had done their job, Helena Hutchins would be alive today. Did you guys hear that part? If they had done their job. See, this is where the negligence piece comes in when we're referring to manslaughter. Because what they're trying to say is that it is still their fault because they didn't do their job. They didn't take the proper precautions ahead of time. So they can still be charged with negligence, thus being charged with manslaughter. That piece is important. Let's go on. It's that simple. Baldwin's attorney said the charges represented a terrible miscarriage of justice. The actor had no reason to believe there was a live bullet in the gun, but that's not the point. Let me highlight this part. The actor had no reason to believe there was a live bullet in the gun. That has nothing to do with the negligence part, though, because it was still their job to check the gun to make sure that there weren't live bullets in the gun. See, this is the piece that they are going to use. This is the piece that is very crucial when they say they didn't do their job. Let's go on. He relied on the professionals with whom he worked, who assured him the gun did not have live rounds. We will fight these charges and we will win. Let me tell you what the DA said. Let me finish this first. An attorney for Gutierrez Reed said the charges were the result of a very flawed investigation and an inaccurate understanding of the full facts. We intend to bring the truth to light and believe Hannah will be exonerated of wrongdoing by a jury. It was unclear when Baldwin and Gutierrez Reed might be required to appear in court in Santa Fe once the charges are filed. Defendants can participate remotely in many initial court proceedings or seek to have their first appearance waived. Santa Fe County Sheriff Aiden Mendoza, who led the initial investigation into Hutchins' death, has described a degree of neglect on the film set. But he left decisions about potential criminal charges to prosecutors after delivering the results of a year-long investigation in October. That report did not specify how live ammunition wound up on the film set. How did that happen, by the way? How did that happen? Baldwin has described the killing as a tragic accident. Notice the words I'm highlighting here: tragic accident, degree of neglect. Pay attention to these things, because I said the same thing. It was an accident, but the DA, they're proving otherwise. They're proving that they were negligent. In his lawsuit, let me start here, sorry. He sought to clear his name by suing people involved in handling and supplying the loaded gun. Baldwin, also co-producer on Rust, said he was told the gun was safe, but he didn't check it. That's the part they're going to use. In his lawsuit, Baldwin said that while working on camera angles with Hutchins, he pointed the gun in her direction and pulled back and released the hammer of the weapon, which discharged. New Mexico's Office of the Medical Investigator determined that the shooting was an accident following the completion of an autopsy and a review of law enforcement reports. New Mexico's Occupational Health and Safety Bureau levied the maximum fine against Rust Movie Productions based on the scathing narrative of safety failures, including testimony that production managers took limited or no action to address 2 misfires of blank ammunition on the set prior to the fatal shooting. So let's see what the DA had to say, because the DA had an interview with CNN, and I really want you to hear.
Prosecutors in New Mexico have just announced that actor Alec Baldwin and the armorer on the film Rust will both be charged with involuntary manslaughter for their roles in the fatal movie set shooting back in October of 2021. The film's cinematographer, Halyna Hutchins, was killed. The film's director was injured. Josh Campbell's back with us from Santa Fe. He's with Santa Fe's district attorney, and this is her first TV interview since the charging decision. Josh?
All right, guys. So this is the DA. Listen to what she's going to say.
Yeah, thanks. I'm here with the district attorney. Madam District Attorney, thank you for speaking with us. I just want to start. How did you come to this prosecutive decision?
Well, along with my special prosecutor, we got the report from the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office. We initiated an extensive review of that, and I will say that it was a well investigated case. But we had some follow up that we had to speak with some experts, and once we read through everything and researched the case law and the law here in New Mexico, we realized that we believed that there was probable cause to charge Alec Baldwin and Hannah Gutierrez-Reed with involuntary manslaughter.
Did you hear what she just said? Probable cause. So hold on to that piece.
What were some of the key pieces of evidence that you used that factored into that decision?
Well, that there was such a lot to do, had to speak with some experts, and once we read through everything and researched the case law and the law here in New Mexico, we realized that we believed that there was probable cause to charge Alec Baldwin and Hannah Gutierrez-Reed with involuntary manslaughter.
And what were some of the key pieces of evidence that you used that factored into that decision?
Well, that there was such a lack of safety and safety standards on that set, that there were live rounds on set. They were mixed in with regular dummy rounds. Nobody was
Pause. Did you guys hear what she just said? Backtrack just a little bit,
Through everything and researched the case law and the law here in New Mexico, we realized that we believed that there was probable cause to charge Alec Baldwin and Hannah Gutierrez-Reed with involuntary manslaughter.
And what were some of the key pieces of evidence that you used that factored into that decision?
Well, that there was such a lack of safety and safety standards on that set, that there were live rounds on set. They were mixed in with regular dummy rounds. Nobody.
Pause. There were live rounds on that set that were mixed in with dummy rounds. So someone just asked this question in the chat. I'm trying to find it. I thought I clicked on it. Someone was asking in the chat. This one has been says, WTF, were they using a real gun that could fire real bullets? Apparently so. I've never been on a movie set, so I don't know, but apparently, based on what she's saying, that seems to be the case. Let's go on.
He was checking those, or at least they weren't checking them consistently. And then they somehow got loaded into a gun, handed off to Alec Baldwin. He didn't check it. He didn't do.
Pause. Somebody stop the presses. Stop the presses here. What do you mean? How did this even happen? Bill Bradley, why were there live rounds on the set at all? It still seems ridiculous, right? Like, this just sounds so unsafe. And keep in mind, they said that Alec Baldwin was a co-producer of the film. So he's one of the producers. This just is great. Here we go.
That there were live rounds on set. They were mixed in with regular dummy rounds. Nobody was checking those, or at least they weren't checking them consistently. And then they somehow got loaded into a gun, handed off.
Nobody was checking them. They weren't checking them consistently, and they somehow got loaded into a gun. How does this happen?
To Alec Baldwin, he didn't check it. He didn't do any of the things that he was supposed to do to make sure that he was safe or that anyone around him was safe. And then he pointed the gun at Helena Hutchins and he pulled the trigger.
You talk about this.
So see, there was another step to this. Alec Baldwin was also supposed to check that gun before he used it. I don't know why they had live rounds on the set. I know a lot of people are saying this in the chat, like, what the heck? I don't know. I've never been on a movie set, so I'm not sure how this works. But Terry Hinton, this goes back to the negligence part that I was pointing out in the article. This is where the negligence piece comes in, because he didn't check the gun. And according to the DA, he was supposed to do that. Oh, man.
Safety on the set was, as part of your investigation, was there one thing that was done or one thing that was said that sealed it for you that this should be prosecuted?
No, actually, I think it was the totality of the circumstances, that this was a really fast and loose set, and that nobody was doing their job. There were 3 people that if they had done their job that day, this tragedy wouldn't have happened. And that's David Halls, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, and Alec Baldwin. If they had just done their basic duties, we wouldn't be standing here.
Can you help our viewers understand?
All 3. She mentioned all 3 of them. That's right, Jennifer. This is crazy because she wasn't in the movie. That's right. I know, it's really sad. It's really sad. What's that? Bill said practical effects are dummy rounds and blanks, not live rounds. This just sounds, it's so unsafe. This just sounds so scary to me that you had live rounds mixed in with the dummy rounds. Why were there live rounds on the set? And I want to know if Alec Baldwin has answered that question, because that's not mentioned in the article.
And so the state officials did a report. It was signed by the chief medical investigator, saying that there was no compelling evidence that this was intentional, right?
Right.
So help our viewers understand, if it's an accident, which most people seem to think it is, why is that a crime?
Because just because it's an accident doesn't mean that it's not criminal. Our involuntary manslaughter statute covers unintentional killings, unintentional homicides. The rest of our homicide statutes cover intentional, but unintentional means they didn't mean to do it. They didn't have the intent to kill. But it happened anyway, and it happened because of more than mere negligence, because of they didn't exercise due caution or circumspection, and that's what happened here.
And
I'll give an example that happened here in Massachusetts in reference to manslaughter, just to compare, make a little bit of a comparison here. There was an 18-year-old boy in Massachusetts. This was a couple of years ago. It was on local news, and he was at that age of 18 where he could be tried as an adult. He was driving home from work one day. Apparently, he was trying to text and drive at the same time. I guess the roads were a little bit slick. He got into an accident. He hit a vehicle. The people in the vehicle died, and he was sentenced to jail. Now, he didn't mean to kill those people, but what they argued in court is that because he was being negligent, because he was texting and driving, had he had not been negligent, those people would most likely have still been alive, even if he had had the accident. Excuse me, backtrack here for a second. Those people would most likely have still been alive, and the accident probably would have been avoided because he wasn't texting and driving at the same. So that case, I still remember that. I believe that happened in Haverhill, Massachusetts. 18-year-old boy, so young, was literally like just about to start his adult life for the most part. And he was crying in the courtroom. This was on local news. Like, he was crying and everything. He was like, I'm so sorry. Like, I didn't mean for it to happen, yada, yada. But what they argued in the court is that he was negligent, because you're not supposed to text and drive in Massachusetts, and he was doing that. And they argued that that is what led to their death. And he was charged with manslaughter. 18 years old. Let's go back. Let's continue.
What's your response to, there might be people in Baldwin's camp who say that you were overcharging this?
Well, we disagree, and we're going to be taking that in front of a judge and allowing the judge to decide on probable cause. But we think that there is enough there, more than enough there, to move forward on these charges and possibly to get through the preliminary hearing stage and on to trial.
And can you just break down the specific charges? So I was reading through your announcement. You say that both Hannah Gutierrez-Reed and Alec Baldwin have been charged with 2 counts of involuntary manslaughter. Can you unpack that? What does that mean?
Well, and those are 2 counts in the alternative. So when this goes in front of a jury, the jury could find they're guilty on both, but since they're in the alternative, they will only be sentenced as to 1 count. The first part of the involuntary that we'll be charging is that they acted without due caution and circumspection, meaning they weren't just negligent in their duties, but that they were on notice, that they had duties, and that they should have done or not done something that didn't happen on that set, meaning they should have checked the bullets. They should have checked the gun. They shouldn't have even been using a live gun that day. They should have been using a rubber or a plastic gun.
Okay, so to argue that point, for those of you asking why were they using a real gun, because I see some of the questions coming through in the chat. According to the DA, she's saying they weren't even supposed to be using, they should have never been using a real gun.
All of these things go together and show that there was just this complacency, lack of care on that set, and it's more than negligence, and I would say it rises to recklessness. The other is goes hand in hand with a misdemeanor, a petty misdemeanor here in New Mexico called negligent use of a deadly weapon, and that is that someone handled or used or touched a gun in a negligent manner. And once we show that, then that can lead to the second alternative theory of involuntary manslaughter.
Does it matter for an actor? Obviously, there's been this discussion about safety on sets. The last time I interviewed you, you even mentioned you were surprised to learn that these sets operate like this in some circumstances. But if you have an actor with what he or she thinks is a prop gun, not a real gun, is that actual negligence if it turns out that gun can actually shoot?
That's a good question. Let's hear her response.
It's more than that. Every person that handles a gun has a duty to make sure that if they are going to handle that gun, point it at someone and pull the trigger, that it is not going to fire a projectile and kill someone. And this is really about justice for Halyna Hutchins. We've talked to many actors, A-list and otherwise, that have said that they always check their guns, or they have someone check it in front of them. So it's not... an actor doesn't get a free pass just because they're an actor. And that's what's so important, is that we're saying here in New Mexico, everyone's equal under the law. Everyone has to follow their duties and do what's right and take that safety into account so that this doesn't ever happen again.
And is Baldwin being charged as an actor who was holding the gun, or as a producer on the set who was negligent about the safety standards? Can you help describe that?
He's being charged as both. He was the actor that pulled the trigger, so certainly he's charged as an actor. But also as a producer, he also had a duty to make sure that the set was safe. And we know from our investigation that there had been accidental misfires prior to this, that there were people that were complaining about safety on set. And so he should have been aware that safety was an issue on set. And then as an actor that day, he should have checked that gun, checked those projectiles.
And just a couple more questions.
She is not backing down. Like, I'm telling you guys right now, like I've seen this already earlier today. She's not backing down from this. And I don't know. I'm just saying it does not look good for them. It does not. But she's not trying to hear it. She's like, no, they didn't do their job. So it is what it is at this point.
I know your time is short. Do you expect any type of plea agreement from Baldwin or Gutierrez-Reed? Have those discussions started?
That's not something I can comment at this time. It's unethical for a prosecutor to talk about plea negotiations or potential plea deals.
Were they given a heads up that this was coming?
Yes.
They were.
They were.
How did those discussions go?
We have been in, I would say, almost constant communication with the opposing parties' counsels for about the last 6 weeks. They didn't know exactly what was coming, but they were aware that we were contemplating charges, and they were aware of what the contemplated charges were.
And just 2 more
I'm sorry. This is okay. There we go.
questions. So what happens next? So once these charges are filed, which I assume is tomorrow, right? Is that the plan?
It'll be before the end of this month.
Before the end of this month. So then what happens? Are these defendants then required to come back to New Mexico, or will they be placed under arrest? How does that work?
No, we will not be asking for an arrest. In typical cases in this county, the way that we handle it is we'll send out what's called a summons. From that, the court will set what's called a first appearance, or it's basically an arraignment. And at that point, they will either have to come here or they might do a video arraignment. We have been doing those since COVID. And they will get their conditions of release and enter not guilty pleas.
Okay. I don't know. Usually I say, like, if someone's wealthy, Alec Baldwin, he's wealthy. He has the resources to get probably one of the best lawyers in the country, right? But the DA, like, it does not sound like she's willing to back down. Not based on what I heard. So I don't know, man. This could be like a life-changing event for Alec Baldwin. Could be a life-changing event. Let me go to some of the comments here. Thank you for the super chat, Susan. Pathetic, tragic, inexcusable. Seems they were trying to cut corners and having too much fun. It's really scary. The lack of safety that was applied there. I don't know. Thank you for the super chat, Terry. If Baldwin was black, he would already be locked up. That's a good point, Terry. That is a good point. Bryce says you always check for live rounds.